The right lobe is much larger than the left, the proportion between them being is 6:1. It occupies the right hypochondrium, on its posterior surface by the ligamentum venosum for the cranial half, and by the ligamentum teres hepatis for the caudal under half. The ligamentum teres hepatis turns around the inferior margin of the liver to come out ventral in the falciform ligament. The right lobe is functionally separated from the left lobe by the middle hepatic vein. A common misconception is that the falciform ligament separates the two lobes. However, from a functional perspective, the falciform ligament separates the medial and lateral segments of the left hepatic lobe. The right lobe is of a somewhat quadrilateral form. Its under and posterior surfaces being marked by three fossae, the fossa for the portal vein, the fossa for the gallbladder, and the fossae for the inferior vena cava. These separate the right lobe in two smaller lobes on its left posterior part, the quadrate lobe and the caudate lobe. The left lobe is smaller and more flattened than the right. It is situated in the epigastric and left hypochondriac regions. Its upper surface is slightly convex and is molded onto the diaphragm. Its undersurface presents the gastric impression and omental tuberosity. The stomach is a muscular, hollow organ in the gastrointestinal tract of humans and many other animals, including several invertebrates. The stomach has a dilated structure and functions as a vital digestive organ. In the digestive system, the stomach is involved in the second phase of digestion. Following mastication in humans and many other animals, the stomach is located between the esophagus and the small intestine. It secretes digestive enzymes and gastric acid to aid in food digestion. The pyloric sphincter controls the passage of partially digested food from the stomach into the duodenum, where peristalsis takes over to move this through the rest of the intestines. The spleen is an organ found in virtually all vertebrates. Similar in structure to a large lymph node, it acts primarily as a blood filter. The spleen plays important roles in regard to red blood cells in the immune system. It removes old red blood cells and holds a reserve of blood, which can be valuable in case of hemorrhagic shock, and also recycles iron. As a part of the mononuclear phagocyte system, it metabolizes hemoglobin removed from senescent red blood cells. The globin portion of hemoglobin is degraded to its constitutive amino acids, and the heme portion is metabolized to bilirubin, which is removed in the liver. The spleen synthesizes antibodies in its white pulp and removes antibody-coated bacteria and antibody-coated blood cells by way of blood and lymph node circulation. These monocytes, upon moving to injured tissue, turn into dendritic cells and macrophages while promoting tissue healing. The spleen is a center of activity of the mononuclear phagocyte system and can be considered analogous to a large lymph node, as its absence causes a predisposition to certain infections. In humans, the spleen is purple in color and is in the left upper quadrant of the abdomen. The pancreas is a glandular organ in the digestive system and endocrine system of vertebrates. In humans, it is located in the abdominal cavity behind the stomach. It is an endocrine gland producing several important hormones, including insulin, glucagon, somatostatin, and pancreatic polypeptide, which circulate in the blood. The pancreas is also a digestive organ, secreting pancreatic juice containing bicarbonate to neutralize acidity of chyme moving in from the stomach, as well as digestive enzymes that assist digestion and absorption of nutrients in the small intestine. These enzymes help to further break down the carbohydrates, proteins, and lipids in the chyme. The pancreas is also known as a mixed gland. In vertebrates, the gallbladder is a small organ where bile is stored and concentrated before it is released into the small intestine. In humans, it lies beneath the liver, although the structure and position of the gallbladder can vary significantly between animal species. It receives and stores bile, produced by the liver, via the common hepatic duct, and releases it via the common bile duct into the duodenum, where the bile helps in the digestion of fats. The gallbladder can be affected by gallstones, formed by material that cannot be dissolved, usually cholesterol or bilirubin, a product of hemoglobin breakdown. These may cause significant pain, particularly in the right upper corner of the abdomen, and are often treated with removal of the gallbladder called a cholecystectomy. Cholecystitis, inflammation of the gallbladder, has a wide range of causes, including result from the impaction of gallstones, infection, and autoimmune disease. The appendix is a blind-ended tube connected to the cecum, from which it develops in the embryo. The cecum is a pouch-like structure of the colon, located at the junction of the small and the large intestines. The human appendix averages 9 cm in length but can range from 2 to. The appendix is a blind-ended tube connected to the cecum, from which it develops in the embryo. The cecum is a pouch-like structure of the colon, located at the junction of the small and the large intestines. The human appendix averages 9 cm in length but can range from 2 to 20 cm. The diameter of the appendix is usually between 7 and 8 mm. The cecum is an intraperitoneal pouch that is considered to be the beginning of the large intestine. It is typically located on the right side of the body. It receives chyme from the ileum, and connects to the ascending colon of the large intestine. It is separated from the ileum by the ileocecal valve, ICV, or Bowhan's valve. It is also separated from the colon by the cecocolic junction. While the cecum is usually intraperitoneal, the ascending colon is retroperitoneal. In herbivores, the cecum stores food material where bacteria are able to break down the cellulose. This function no longer occurs in the human cecum, so in humans it is simply a dead-end pouch forming a part of the large intestine. The ascending colon is the part of the colon located between the cecum and the transverse colon. The ascending colon is smaller in caliber than the cecum from where it starts. It passes upward, opposite the colic valve, to the undersurface of the right lobe of the liver, on the right of the gallbladder, where it is lodged in a shallow depression, the colic impression. Here it bends abruptly forward and to the left, forming the right colic flexure where it becomes the transverse colon. It is retained in contact with the posterior wall of the abdomen by the peritoneum, which covers its anterior surface and sides, its posterior surface being connected by loose areolar tissue with the iliacus, quadratus lumborum, aponeurotic origin of transversus abdominis, and with the front of the lower and lateral part of the right kidney. Sometimes the peritoneum completely invests it and forms a distinct but narrow mesocolon. It is in relation, in front, with the convolutions of the ileum and the abdominal walls. The transverse colon is the longest and most movable part of the colon. It crosses the abdomen from the ascending colon at the hepatic or right colic flexure with a downward convexity to the descending colon where it curves sharply on itself beneath the lower end of the spleen, forming the splenic or left colic flexure. In its course, it describes an arch, the concavity of which is directed backward and a little upward. Toward its splenic end there is often an abrupt U-shaped curve which may descend lower than the main curve. It is almost completely invested by peritoneum, and is connected to the inferior border of the pancreas by a large and wide duplicature of that membrane, the transverse mesocolon. The descending colon is the part of the large intestine from the splenic flexure to the beginning of the sigmoid colon. The function of the descending colon in the digestive system is to store the remains of digested food that will be emptied into the rectum. The descending colon begins at the splenic flexure at the upper left part of the abdomen. It passes downward through the left hypochondrium and lumbar regions, along the outer border of the left kidney and ends at the lower left part of the abdomen where it continues as the sigmoid colon. It is retroperitoneal in 2/3 of humans. In the other third, it has a mesentery. The arterial supply comes via the left colic artery. The sigmoid colon is the part of the large intestine that is closest to the rectum and anus. It forms a loop that averages about 35 to 40 cm in length. The loop is typically shaped like a Greek letter sigma or Latin letter S. This part of the colon normally lies within the pelvis, but on account of its freedom of movement it is liable to be displaced into the abdominal cavity. The rectum is the final straight portion of the large intestine in humans and some other mammals, and the gut in others. The human rectum is about 12 cm (4.7 in) long, and begins at the rectosigmoid junction, the end of the sigmoid colon, at the level of the third sacral vertebra or the sacral promontory depending upon what definition is used. Its caliber is similar to that of the sigmoid colon at its commencement, but it is dilated near its termination, forming the rectal ampulla. It terminates at the level of the anorectal ring, the level of the puborectalis sling, or the dentate line, again depending upon which definition is used. In humans, the rectum is followed by the anal canal, before the gastrointestinal tract terminates at the anal verge. The human anus is the external opening of the rectum. Two sphincters control the exit of feces from the body during an act of defecation, which is the primary function of the anus. These are the internal anal sphincter and the external anal sphincter, which are circular muscles that normally maintain constriction of the orifice and which relaxes as required by normal physiological functioning. The inner sphincter is involuntary and the outer is voluntary. It is located behind the perineum, which is located behind the vagina in females and behind the scrotum in males.